Hello, I've been thinking about pain this week, of all things, pain in fiction writing specifically, and whether there are some ways of helping the beginner writer articulate the pain in their written work. Pain's one of those tricky things that it's difficult enough to deal with and articulate verbally when we're experiencing it, never mind when we're trying to put it into a novel. And so I wondered if there was some guidance from, say, the poets and even medicine that might help writers articulate their written pain more effectively. So I've got 5 tips for you to help you articulate your pain in your fiction writing. Readers are really good at filling in gaps and letting their imaginations do the work for them. And one of the things I've noticed in my editing work is that sometimes one of the mistakes that beginner writers can make is not trusting their reader. And so that's the first approach that you might consider. Do you actually need to tell the reader that your character is indeed suffering? The second tip is to think about the type of pain that your character's experiencing. And here I did branch out into the world of medicine, and I looked particularly at the McGill Pain Questionnaire, which divides pain into several different categories, things like pointy pain, sharp pain, stabbing pain, crushing pain. And I wondered if there was a way to use those descriptors to help writers think about how they might describe the pain. And then that kind of led on to my third tip, which was rather than explicitly using those descriptors, to instead think about them in terms of nudges. So if you had, for example, a stabbing pain, what might the physical response be of the character if they were experiencing a stabbing pain? Might the writer express the suffering of the character through the way they respond to that pain, rather than actually being told of what type of pain it is? My fourth tip is to look at how the poets do it, and Milton came to the fore here. Paradise Lost, you probably won't be surprised to hear. There's a wonderful verse in Book 1 where Milton describes Satan's journey across a sea of fire, and he describes the environment and the way Satan moves, his laboured movements. And by the end of that verse, you're in no doubt that Satan's in terrible pain, and yet Milton never tells you that once. Not once. It's just, you just know it. You just know it from the description of everything that's going on around him. And it's a really good example of how you might show pain rather than telling it. My fifth tip is to acknowledge the limitations of agony. Agony is different to other types of pain. It's the ultimate pain, and I've only experienced it a couple of times in my life, thank goodness, but it changed me. It rendered me without the ability to move in a way I chose to. It rendered me without reason, and it rendered me without language. And so when I read about a character experiencing agony in a novel, I expect that character to be changed. I expect there to be limitations as to what they can achieve. And so there is a danger that in a scene where a character's doing something extraordinary, like throwing roundhouse kicks and looking for escape exits and planning this evening's dinner date, and they're in agony all at the same time, where I begin to think that what I'm reading isn't authentic anymore. There's nothing wrong with escapist fiction writing like this. We see it in Hollywood movies all the time. But if you're trying to write a novel that is gritty and authentic, realistic, then it's probably best to reserve your agony for very special occasions and acknowledge that there are going to be limitations as to what your character can achieve. So those are my 5 top tips. If you want to read the blog post in full, where I go into quite a bit more detail, then you can find it in the link attached.